you think you're safe, even surrounded by your closest friends, wearing your favorite mask at a lively Halloween party, you need to hear my story. Because the night I trusted my happiness, my friends, my mask, and my truth, I lost everything, and it all began with a stranger whose mask wore nothing but a smile. The Smile Collector. They call our little town Evergreen Falls, where every Halloween someone tries outdoing last year's party. I've always been the guy to organize things. Neighborhood get-togethers, haunted hayrides, apple bobbing competitions. Maybe that's why everyone expected me to make this year's mask party unforgettable. I wanted to impress, I'll admit, and maybe even prove for once, that small towns can still pull off real scares, not just corny jump scares and plastic skeletons. We held it at the old Jacobson barn on the edge of the woods. I'd spent the whole day stringing orange lights, setting up driftwood seats, and hauling in fake cobwebs. My phone buzzed continuously as folks RSVP'd, and by nightfall 40-plus guests drifted in, locals, friends of friends, even a few strangers I didn't recognize under those elaborate masks. The party takes off. Music, pumpkin punch, laughter echoing beneath rafters. I spot our regulars. Hannah by the snack table, Rick showing off his zombie face paint, and Kara, best dressed as usual, twirling beside the homemade fog machine. There's a kind of joy to seeing everyone enjoy themselves, hidden behind creatures and monsters. Just near 10, that's when I noticed him, the last guest to arrive. No RSVP, no introduction, just there standing at the barn door. His mask was a smooth, pale ceramic face, the kind you might see in a thrift store, and its only feature was a grotesque smile painted crimson from cheek to cheek. He didn't speak or gesture, and no one seemed to know him. Still, it was Halloween. What's a mask party without a mysterious guest? For a while, all seemed fine. I figured he was a friend of someone I'd forgotten, so I left him to mingle. But whenever I glanced over, he stood alone, not eating, not even moving. My gut twisted with that faint sense of wrongness, the kind you get walking beneath flickering street lamps at midnight. 20 minutes later, I tried approaching him, beer in hand. "Hey, cool mask," I joked, no reply. His head tilted slightly, that monstrous rictus unmoving. His eyes glimmered behind the holes, black and unreadable. I shrugged it off, but the unease lingered. From then on, odd things began happening. Kara waved me over. "Bathroom's locked. Did you put up those weird notes?" Sure enough, inside the restroom, someone had taped scraps of paper to the mirror. Smile wider. The truth is on your face. Red stains cannot be washed away. The handwriting was jagged, the letters curling in strange directions. I peeled the notes down, made a dumb joke, and flushed them away, but the mood shifted just a bit. Shadows in the corners seemed longer, music colder somehow. By 11, Hannah asked, "Hey, have you seen Rick?" I hadn't, and when I scoured the barn, he was nowhere. "Probably out by the fire pit," I said. Except his phone was left near the snacks and his coat was still hanging up. 5 minutes later, someone found a mask in the hayloft. Rick's mask, a comic Frankenstein, now tarnished with something dark and sticky inside. Panic prickled through the room. I texted Rick, no answer. I told myself he was screwing around, trying for scares. Yet, when 3 other guests spotted the grinning stranger lurking behind the barn, everyone agreed he felt wrong. Even the bravest joked about it, but no one approached him again. He never danced, never ate, just watched. Soon, others started commenting on things missing, phones left behind, wallets nowhere to be found. The laughter became awkward, conversations shorter. Outside, wind howled against old wood, making us huddle closer. I checked on Kara, who was near tears. "It's not funny anymore," she whispered. "He's still here, isn't he?" But when I turned, the stranger was gone. Some guests started packing up, nervous. Before I could corral them and explain, the lights flickered and died. Cold filled the air. Someone yelled from the restroom. Another note appeared, this one written in lipstick across the mirror. "Who wears the truest mask?" I scanned faces, searching for the stranger, but now everyone's mask looked sinister in the gloom. Cell phones struggled for signal. People began to leave, some running out into fog. I stayed behind last of all, desperate to lock up, to convince myself it had just been a scare, some prank gone too far. I swept the barn, calling Rick's name, but all I found was the broken Frankenstein mask in the loft and crimson fingerprints on the hay. My mind raced with what to tell everyone next morning. How to explain Rick's disappearance and the stranger's silent vigil. I walked to the restroom one last time. Maybe another note lingered. The mirror, now streaked with red, reflected me in my own mask. Plain plastic, designed to look friendly. And there, at the edge, rested the stranger's smile mask. Grimacing, I picked it up. Inside, red smeared across fingers, blood unmistakable. I looked in the mirror and saw my own eyes staring back. Wide with terror, suddenly a memory flashed. The arrival. The stranger's silence, his mask's painted smile, and the way he moved as if knowing some secret about each of us. The last time anyone saw him, he'd been behind me, so close I could feel breath on my neck. I dropped the mask, heart pounding. When I glanced down, I realized my own hands were stained red, the same color that now marked the inside of my mask. The color nobody noticed until tonight. I staggered outside, frantic, calling Rick's name. No answer, only fog and wind rushing through the fields. I searched through the crowd, everyone gone now except me. As I drove home, hands shaking, glimpses of my mask haunted me from the passenger seat. That night I didn't change clothes. I didn't sleep. In the days that followed, nobody found Rick. No one claimed to know the stranger. But neighbors whispered about the blood-stained mask left at the barn, and the host whose own mask now held a crimson smile. Sometimes in the dead hours, I wake to the whisper, "Smile wider." The truth is on your face, and some nights I wonder if the real mask was me all along. Room 203's whisper. If you're the kind of person who thinks haunted house stories are all cliché, you should steer clear of what I'm about to share. I never cared for ghost tales until Halloween 2 years ago, when I almost lost my mind and my best friend to the horrors of room 213. I'll begin simply. I'm Alex, ordinary, skeptical, allergic to all things supernatural. Halloween's always been about pranks and too much candy for me. That year, Leah convinced our group to rent the Lockwood House, an old Victorian rumored to be a stop for ghost tour junkies. "It'll be fun," she said, flipping through glowing reviews about cold spots and flickering lights. Between us were 4 friends: Leah, me, Carter, Sarah, and Will. We were all in our 20s, bored with the city's predictable parties. Still, the house's imposing silhouette and rusted brass gate felt like entering a dare none of us really accepted. Inside, Lockwood House was a time capsule, thick tapestries muting every step, glass-eyed portraits staring down from rosewood walls. The caretaker, Mr. Griffin, nodded to us with a crooked smile, muttering something about keeping candles burning in the upper halls. We all laughed it off, but my skin crawled when he handed Leah a single key. "For room 213, he said, "if you're feeling brave." There was an unspoken challenge in the air, and after dinner and too many cheap drinks, Leah dared the bravest among us, Carter, to spend the night in room 213. The old guest book said that room had once housed a patient, back when the house briefly served as an asylum during the 1920s. Supposedly, the original lock and barred windows were still intact. Will and I argued about who had more guts, and Sarah merely rolled her eyes. But Carter, always the golden boy, pocketed the key with a cocky grin. "I'll even leave my phone behind," he promised, waving the inert brick before us. "If I see ghosts, I'll leave the door wide open." That's when the night tipped from playful into something else. The climb to the second floor felt unnaturally cold. Carpets muffled our footfalls. Leah's flashlight flickered, casting shadow puppets that danced ahead of us. Room 213 sat at the end of a corridor, its brass numbers dulled with age. The door creaked open, its hinges whining like a distant animal. Inside, the air was thick and metallic, colder than the rest of the house. The wallpaper, yellowed and curling, was patterned with what looked like faded violets. An iron bed sat bolted to the floor, mattress thin and stiff as cardboard, a single candle stub on the nightstand. I noticed a bitter medicinal smell beneath the must, undertones of old bleach and rot. We gave Carter a blanket and some ribbing about wetting the bed, then left him reading aloud some old graffiti carved into the wall. "I am never alone." His voice echoed down the silent hallway as we retreated to our own rooms. Pretending bravado, I woke at 2:11 a.m. to the sound of soft rhythmic humming. It came through the vent in the wall, a melody both childlike and wrong, twisting the usual comfort of nursery rhymes into something sinister. "Ring around the rosy," it murmured. the notes warbling in and out. I stumbled into the hallway, nearly colliding with Sarah and Leah, faces pale and eyes wide. "That's Carter," Leah whispered, pointing at room 213's closed door. The humming grew louder, not quite human, strangely layered, sometimes drifting into what sounded like another language. The candlelight flickered beneath the door, casting strange shadows that didn't match human shapes. Will, in boxers and a sports jersey, tried to laugh it off, but it sounded like choking. He knocked twice, then opened the door. Carter was sitting on the iron bed, rocking, eyes pressed shut. His hands twisted in his lap, nails scratching raw red arcs on his jeans. He sang, sometimes in a child's falsetto, other times guttural, almost animal. "Turn the key, close your eyes, fall asleep or someone dies." When Leah whispered his name, he snapped open his eyes, but they didn't look like Carter's. His stare was glassy, black, as if pupils had swallowed the color. For a second, his mouth twitched into a smile I'd never seen before. I reached for him, but he recoiled, folding in on himself. "I remember now," he whispered over and over. "I remember who I am. I was here before. I am never alone." That was when the candle erupted, guttering wildly, though there was no wind. The temperature dropped, air so icy that I saw condensation swirling from Carter's lips. My fingertips tingled numb. I tried pulling him to his feet, but he slid away, reciting, sometimes screaming, sometimes barely audible. The door slammed shut in my face, hard enough to jar my shoulder. There was no lock, but it wouldn't budge. The humming in the walls grew, whispers layering atop Carter's voice. I pressed my ear to the wood, phrases in dozens of voices, some lilting, some weeping, one shrieking laughter. Leah screamed for help. Sarah called out prayers. Will tried the window but found it wouldn't unlock, its hinges rusted over. I pounded on the door with my fists, calling Carter's name until my voice broke. Everything went silent at exactly 4:13 a.m. When we managed to force the door open, room 213 was empty. No sign of Carter, only the chill, the overturned blanket, and the candle guttered out in a puddle of wax. The room smelled of old metal and perfume, carved in long scratches into the bed frame. I am never alone. We searched the house for hours, calling for Carter, searching every nook of the mansion. The caretaker insisted he hadn't seen or heard a thing. By sunrise, our group was smaller by one, but the humming never left. Even on the drive home, whispers echoed through the vents of my car radio. Sometimes, even now, in those moments between waking and sleeping, I hear Carter's voice singing twisted lullabies. Sometimes it's not his voice at all. I rarely sleep well, and I never ever visit old houses on Halloween. The sweetheart killer. If you've ever thought the scariest thing about love was losing it, you haven't met someone who can make you question whether you ever truly knew the person behind the mask. That's the story I have to tell you, and it begins at what was supposed to be the perfect Halloween night. The night I learned how easily a heart can turn cold, and how terrifying it is to realize the person closest to you has been playing a role all along. I'm Mia. Halloween's our thing. My boyfriend Julian and I have always made it a big deal, cosplaying, going to haunted events, sharing private jokes under the fake cobwebs. This year, he invited me to my first real masked ball, something elegant, mysterious, a step up from frat parties and barn bashes. I spent weeks planning my costume. A silver lace-trimmed mask paired with a flowing black dress, feeling half movie star, half temptress. Julian seemed excited in texts, counting down the days, but in person he was distracted, uncharacteristically distant. As we drove to the mansion, a long-abandoned estate now rented for the night, I noticed the corner of his mouth twitching and a strange intensity in his eyes. He leaned close as we walked up the stone path, voice low. "If you had to prove your love, really prove it, how far would you go? What would you give up?" I laughed it off, thinking he was playing into the Halloween mood, dark, mysterious, dramatic. But something about his voice set me on edge. Inside, the ballroom was a dream. Candlelight flickering against stained glass, flickering shadows chasing couples as they moved. The air smelled sweet and smoky, with hints of spiced wine and wax. Music vibrated through the floor, pulsing like a heartbeat. Everyone wore masks, big or small, old-fashioned or grotesque. I didn't recognize a single face, and for a while, that anonymity was thrilling. With Julian's arm around my waist, dancing to slow jazz, I felt almost suspended in time. But as the night wore on, Julian grew restless. His questions became stranger. "Would you forgive me anything?" he asked, voice almost lost under the music. "If I hurt you, would you still love me, even if I lied?" I tried to smile, but his mask looked different, darker around the edges, as if it was absorbing shadow. When I touched his hand, he squeezed my fingers, cold and damp. I pulled back, uneasy. At midnight, the host announced the unmasking. Couples gathered, giggling, some sneaking kisses. Julian tugged me aside toward a dark alcove, his fingers trembling. I reached for his mask, but he jerked away, whispering, "Wait." For a moment, I caught a whiff of something foul, metallic, rancid, layered above wine and perfume. He doubled over, clutching the sides of his mask. I asked if he needed help, but his breathing grew shallow. The white mask he wore was slick, not with sweat, but something thick red-black seeping from the edges. My chest tightened with dread. In the next moment, Julian let go of my hand and disappeared into the swirling crowd. I called after him, stumbling through the dancers, searching faces, searching masks. The ballroom blurred. Glitter, laughter, flashes of fear. I found his mask by the main stairs. Sticky, smeared with crimson. There was no sign of Julian. The clock chimed and music lilted into chaos. I called his name over and over. Partygoers. Barely noticed. Faces glazed with merriment or masked indifference. After hours of searching, pleading for help, shaking hands, nearly collapsing with fear, someone finally called security. But Julian was gone. Only his mask remained, collapsed like shed skin. I went home that night alone, hands still trembling, heart pounding out of sync with the world. I barely slept, replaying every word, every look. At sunrise, my phone vibrated. A single message from Julian's number. "You finally saw the real me." I reported everything to the police. His questions, the mask, the blood, the text. They searched. All day, combing the mansion, interviewing staff and guests. Eventually, they found only his mask, stained and unrecognizable. The rest of the party blurred together. No one remembered Julian's face, only a vague shape where he'd been. Days later, I still hear his words in my dreams. "What would you give up for love?" I only hope the answer isn't my sanity. Sometimes late at night, my phone lights up with a message. Blank, but for the emoji of a red-stained heart. I never go to masked balls anymore. And I wonder, every time I put on makeup, fasten jewelry, or slip on a costume, if the person I loved was ever truly behind his mask at all. The collector's basement. If you ever decide that social media horror stories are just scripted stunts, let me be the one to make you think twice. I built my life around sharing everything, turning fear into clicks and curiosity into followers. But nothing prepared me for the night my live stream in the collector's basement became my last true broadcast, and the nightmare I still live every time a camera lens finds my face. My name's Jesse. Maybe you've seen me. Jesse Jump Scares, queen of haunted house tours, urban legends, and live reactions to all things creepy. Halloween is the biggest night of the year for me. Every October, I up the ante. A new location, a new legend, a fresh wave of followers hungry for a scare. This year, all my fans insisted, "Go to Willowmere House." The mansion had history, old, rotting, shrouded in fog, hidden down a winding lane beyond the main road in my little town. The lore was irresistible, missing kids, weird screams, rumors of a secret basement filled with relics of fear. I dug around online, found grainy images, even a floor plan posted by some renegade ghost hunter years ago. It was perfect. I packed my gear, night vision camera, ring light, backup phone battery, enough charm to laugh off nightmares. My producer Mel waited in the van outside, ready to signal if I needed help. "You got this," she encouraged, half teasing, half nervous. I approached just after dusk, flashlight cutting through thick autumn mist. The mansion loomed slate blue and broken. Crickets fell silent as I stepped onto the porch. "Hey guys," I whispered to my followers. "Wish me luck. Willowmere's waiting." Inside, my sneakers made muffled thumps on warped wood. The air was heavy, stinking of mildew, copper, and something sickly sweet that clung to my throat. My breath clouded in the gloom. The chat exploded with emojis, dares, and go to the basement. Spam. The main floor was cliché. Peeling wallpaper, shattered mirrors, faded family portraits. But the basement door was no joke. Heavy oak, splintered, padlocked with an old chain. I'd gotten the key from a local historian, who smirked when he handed it to me, warning, "Some rooms want to stay closed." I wrangled the lock, heart pounding as I forced the door. The staircase was steep, slick with unseen moisture. Each step creaked beneath my weight, echoing through the phone mic. Almost there, I breathed, seeking comfort from the live chat. The basement was impossibly black, deeper than I'd imagined, walls lined in rough stone. My ring light flickered. Dying battery or interference? For a second, I froze, feeling the air temperature drop 5 degrees. My skin crawled. There was a door in the far wall, concealed behind a rotting curtain. I yanked it aside. What I saw stopped my stream of consciousness commentary cold. A row of display cases, caked in dust, stacked atop a stained wooden table. Photographs everywhere. Hundreds of faces, eyes wide in terror, mouths contorted in screams or silent pleading. Some were Polaroids, some faded, some curled, all with dated handwriting scrawled in the bottom corner. Next to every photo was a lock of hair in a glass vial, pale and brittle, taped with names and dates in shaky script. Masks hung along the wall, staring back at me. Not theatrical masks. These were molded from pale clay, shaped to mimic the features in the photos. Each mask had a name written on its brow. Aiden, 1978. Lily, 1982. Mona, 1996. A chill prickled my skin as I realized these weren't props, but memorials. Something sharp caught my peripheral vision. A ring of broken mirrors piled on the floor, reflecting slices of my face, fractured and multiplied. My chat blew up. "Run! Are those real? Did you hear that?" I studied the table closer. Dust and old perfume hung in the air, tinged with the unmistakable iron scent of dried blood. I saw a tape recorder, batteries corroded. A faded newspaper clipping. 4 missing, feared dead. Footsteps above made me jump. I joked shakily, "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, call someone." Behind me, the darkness seemed to pulse. The ring light flared, then died. I squinted at the last mask, smaller than the others. Something about its smile felt familiar. I reached out and brushed the cheek, cold, clammy. For a split second, the mask felt warm. My phone vibrated wildly, but the stream glitched, distorting, audio warping into static. Suddenly, the display case rattled. Air grew colder. I whipped around. In the dim silvery light, I saw a silhouette at the base of the stairs, tall, gaunt, head cocked, watching. My breath trembled. I tried to address the audience, voice shaking. "Did you see that behind me?" The chat froze. My phone screen filled with distorted faces, some eerily resembling the ones on the wall. The figure stepped forward, slow and menacing. I staggered back, tripping over broken tiles. In the scramble, I dropped the phone. The screen spun, images jittered. For a fleeting second, the viewers saw it too. Someone else moving in the darkness, just behind me, taller than Mel, eyes glistening, fingers trailing along the display cases. "Is that Mel?" I asked feebly, voice half a shriek. But the silhouette was wrong. Heavy limbs, mask-like face, mouth stretched in a sick smile. My viewers' final comments filled the feed before the connection died. "Behind you." "Get out now!" "Who is that?" I snatched the phone, bolted for the stairs, stumbling, choking on the foul, sweet rot. I never saw the figure's face, not fully. Just the outline. Just those hands tracing the photos, lips murmuring. My collection grows. Outside, air flooded my lungs. I collapsed on the lawn, sobbing, the phone screen blank, Mel screaming my name from the van. The stream ended with my audience catching one last image. A pale, mask-like face lurking in the total darkness behind me. Mel swore no one came out after me. The door slammed shut. Ever since, I see fractured faces and mirror shards. Sometimes in the quiet hours, I hear a whisper in my phone, replaying the night, promising, "You're next." Candy-coated intentions. If you think bad Halloween candy is the worst surprise you'll get at a neighborhood mask party, I wish I could swap places with you for a night. I used to love the simple pleasures, caramel popcorn, plastic fangs, little pranks between friends. But on the night I learned what a real trick could feel like, my world changed for good. This is what happened when someone with a truly twisted sense of fun came to play on our street. I'm Leo. I've lived on Willow Drive for my whole life, the kind of cul-de-sac where everyone remembers the names of your childhood pets. Halloween here is no joke. The neighbors compete to outdo each other's decorations, and the annual mask party spills out onto lawns. This year, Mrs. Turner's place did the honors. Her front yard decked in orange lights and fake cobwebs so thick you could get lost in them. I showed up late, mask in hand, but heart not really in it. There'd been a weird tension all week, nasty prank calls around town, someone's mailbox smeared with fake blood, a row of pumpkins smashed to pulp. But the mood that night was festive, kids shrieking and darting around adults, the air thick with cinnamon and cold. It was only once you stepped inside the party that things felt off. Strange music played from an old record player, warbled and too slow, like a childhood tune warped on a dying battery. People mingled, laughing a little too loudly. Someone had set out a punch bowl swirling with dry ice smoke, and the candy, real homemade stuff, not a cheap brand in sight. But what struck everyone was the little folded notes that came with each handful of sweets. The papers were pale pink, words scrawled in blocky, uneven handwriting. Tricks over treats tonight. Not all sweets are for the sweet. And the note I got, "Are you scared yet?" I chuckled, showing it to my friend Tara, who grinned and taped hers to her mask. Someone dared to read theirs aloud, and a ripple of laughter went around the room. It became a game, everyone trading notes, trying to outdo the creep factor. Nobody knew who'd made them, but we chalked it up to Mrs. Turner's weird sense of humor. As the night wore on, a chilly wind slipped in every time the door opened. The lights flickered and pooled in strange corners. I caught glimpses of figures standing too still between the strings of cobwebs. The candy itself tasted bitter, not in a poisoned way, just wrong, like something left too long in the dark. Midnight rolled in and most guests had gone home, but those of us who'd read our notes stayed behind for the mask reveal. I kept fiddling with my phone, nervously scrolling until it rang unexpectedly. No caller ID. I hesitate, then answer. There was a woman's voice on the other end, whispering, "Did you like your trick?" I laughed it off at first, thinking Tara was pulling a prank. But then I heard the same voice emanating from the other room, and realized half the people around me had phones pressed to their ears, faces draining of color. Her words changed, sometimes taunting, sometimes threatening, always in that unreadable whisper. "Be careful tonight. You're not as safe as you think. I know your mask. I know your name." Each message different, but all arriving at the same moment. Anxiety built up in the room. People hung up and called each other, checked caller IDs, switched their phones to silent. But every few minutes the calls returned, usually from blocked numbers, sometimes even from our own contact names. The house felt colder. A lamp flickered out. Mrs. Turner's voice shook as she asked if anyone knew what was happening, but none of us did. When we tried to call out, our phones glitched. Strange feedback whined, sometimes picking up faint giggles, a woman's hum under the static. Sometime around 2, we decided enough was enough. Everyone hurried to say goodbye, clutching their masks, half running for their cars. As I left, I noticed Tara by the back fence with her phone pressed to her ear, listening intently. I called out, but she didn't answer, just staring at the dark behind Mrs. Turner's yard. The next morning, the whole block was buzzing. Dozens of phones had been left in Mrs. Turner's backyard, smashed to pieces, battery covers torn off, screens spiderwebbed. My phone was there too, though I'd sworn it was in my jacket pocket when I fell asleep on my couch. No one remembered how they got there. The grass was torn up beneath our feet, and in the center was a mask, torn in half, stained deep red around the mouth. Tara's note was stuck to it. "Tricks over treats. Are you scared yet?" The police came, but nobody could explain the calls or the missing hours. Some people swore they heard a woman laughing on their home phones for weeks after. Mrs. Turner won't host Halloween parties anymore. As for me, I still sometimes wake up with phantom vibrations in my hand, the memory of that voice whispering something new each time. Sometimes I think I see someone waiting in the dark at the end of my street, her mask never slipping, laughing to herself about the biggest trick she played yet. Mirror game. If you're the type who laughs at old superstitions, let me tell you about the last Halloween party I ever attended. My name is Kara, and I'd always thought haunted games were just for kids, until the night the mirror game showed me just how wrong I could be. Growing up, I loved Halloween for the costumes, the candy, the shadows that made familiar places suddenly menacing and new. This year, my friend Mark hosted the annual party at his family's century-old house, all creaking floorboards and flickering candlelight. When we first arrived, the air buzzed with laughter and anticipation. Masks of every shape and color spun in the low light, the scent of caramel and wood smoke drifting through open windows. By midnight, the living room was crowded and warm from too many bodies packed into one space. Mark grinned, holding up an old hand mirror with a worn silver frame. Its glass was so tarnished that everything it reflected shimmered and warped. "Time for the mirror game," he announced, eyes glinting with mischief. "Everyone gets 1 minute alone, staring at your masked reflection. Don't break eye contact no matter what." There was a ripple of nervous laughter, but nobody said no. We all lined up, daring each other to go first. I sipped my cider and watched as each person took their turn, disappearing into the candlelit study with the mirror propped on an antique table. When it was my turn, the room felt suddenly colder. I carried the mirror to the farthest corner, where shadows shifted and dust danced in the slant of light. I adjusted my mask, black sequins with sharp silver details, and set a timer on my phone. 1 minute. As soon as I met my own eyes in the glass, I felt a prickling at the back of my neck, as if someone else was breathing my air. My heart thudded. The ticking of the antique clock in the hall grew louder. The mask reflected at first as it should. Glamorous, mysterious, oddly regal. But soon the shape seemed to warp, edges blurring, the mouth twisting wider into a cold, artificial smile. My pupils looked impossibly big, swallowing the whites, settling into bottomless voids. I told myself it was just nerves, just my imagination, but the mask kept changing in tiny, impossible ways. The silver details stretched, curling like vines over my cheeks. The grin carved itself deeper, almost splitting my face. My eyes, my own eyes, I swear, seemed to look back at me not with recognition, but impossibly with hunger. My minute was up. I blinked and forced myself to break contact. My body felt as if electricity pulsed through my veins. The air was thick, tasting of old pennies and something sharp. I stood swiftly, mirror trembling in my hands. As I rejoined the others, I felt different, as if something inside me shifted sideways. Mark asked if I was okay, and I heard myself respond, but my voice sounded far away, hollow and strange. "What's above is below. The one who watches waits in the hollow," I found myself murmuring. I hadn't meant to say anything, let alone something so bizarre. The game went on, each person reporting nothing more than goosebumps or a chill. But I kept watching my own reflection in each candlelit window, half expecting the mask to move again. Guests began to drift out, but I stayed in the room with the mirror, unable to stop staring. Mark grew uneasy, whispering to Sarah that I wouldn't take off my mask. Even when offered a drink, I refused, saying odd, cryptic things that made no sense even to me. Everything felt muffled, like I was submerged and watching the party through glass. The hours spun away. Nobody wanted to play the game anymore. Mark finally picked up the mirror, intent on packing it away, but I snatched it back, clutching it to my chest. "It sees better with two faces," I whispered, though I had no idea what that phrase even meant. The party thinned as nervous energy filled the space. Eventually, Mark declared the game over and tried to get me to leave, gently tugging at my mask. The moment his fingers touched it, I recoiled, screaming, "Don't touch what you cannot see!" My voice wasn't mine. It was guttural, echoing, cracking the comfortable warmth of the party with ice-cold panic. Lights flickered and went out. The smell of burning filled the air even though nothing was aflame. Guests ran out into the yard, shouting for help, but no one dared cross the threshold back inside. When the lights flicked back on, I was gone. Only my mask remained, perched perfectly before the mirror. And in the reflection, Witnesses later insisted 2 faces flickered briefly. Though the room was empty, no one knows what happened to me. Not really. If you ask Mark, he'll say my voice sometimes still floats through that old study on cold nights, whispering riddles to anyone who dares look into the mirror. He smashed the glass and buried the mask in the garden, but some nights he sees fresh footprints in the dirt, leading to the very spot. That's the last Halloween party Mark ever hosted. And maybe, somewhere out there, I'm still playing the game, waiting for the next person foolish enough to try to meet their own eyes in the dark. Jack's final grin. If you've ever grown up in a town where legends stretch longer than summer shadows, you'll know what it's like to live with a ghost. My name is Ethan, and I was never one for old wives' tales or cautionary campfire warnings. But I can't laugh off Jack the Joker anymore. Not after what happened this Halloween. Greendale isn't some big city, just a patch of neighborhoods tucked between cornfields and the remains of a dried-up river. Every kid in town knows the legend. Every 10 years on Halloween night, Jack the Joker returns. You'll know him by his mask. A white grin painted so wide it nearly splits the face, eyes ringed in black, just a sprinkle of childish joy twisted into something mean. The old folks say Jack began as some prankster who took his jokes too far. Others say he was never human at all. It's a story that lives on trick-or-treat lips, whispered during sleepovers when the wind rattles the windows. Don't answer the door if he knocks. Don't laugh too loud or he'll want to see what's so funny. I always rolled my eyes. But this year, the 10th anniversary, my friend Rachel decided to throw the biggest Halloween party Greendale had ever seen. It's time to laugh off this legend, she said, waving a bunch of invites. We'll all wear Joker masks, have a contest, and prove he's just a story. The party was at her uncle's barn, and by 8, the place was buzzing with music and colored lights. Hay bales scattered across the lawn. Everyone showed up in their best grinning masks. Cartoonish, ridiculous, some store-bought, some homemade. Even old Mr. Hinckley wore one, though his looked more grim than fun. I felt a little silly wearing mine, but I played along. There was cider, donuts, a fog machine that sputtered and filled the room with a sweet chemical mist. It almost felt safe, everyone behind the same smile, laughter echoing through the rafters. But around 10 o'clock, the energy shifted. The wind whistled through the cracks in the barn walls, blowing out 2 jack-o'-lanterns at once. That's when I noticed the new arrival, standing just inside, taller than most. His mask painted with a grin so grotesque it looked hand-carved, an awful rictus that felt older than all the plastic in the room. Nobody recognized the costume, so we assumed he was a friend of a friend. He didn't talk, but he watched the games, bobbing for apples. The pumpkin toss, never joining in, always at the edge of the light. Then the prank started. First, somebody replaced the apple cider with brine. Harmless, sure, but enough to ruin a few mouths. Then Rachel's kid brother screamed from the hayloft. Someone had locked him in and scattered spiders all over the stairs. They were fake, but Isaac's panic was real. We started blaming each other as the tricks grew cruel. Paint splashed onto the invitation pile, soaking everyone's names. Phones vanished from coat pockets, car keys disappeared. We nervously joked about the spirit of Jack getting into the fun. But my nerves were tight as piano wire. The stranger in the grotesque grin said nothing, just walked from corner to corner as if surveying the place. I tried to talk to him, maybe pull off his mask, but every time I got close, he ducked beneath the beams or seemed to vanish among the crowd. Just after midnight, the lights flickered out. The music cut, leaving us alone with rustling straw and the sound of dozens of nervous giggles dissolving into whispers. A girl shrieked, then laughter, not joyful but ragged, high and cold, drifted from the shadows. Someone's mask was snatched away. Another guest tripped and fell in the dark, crying out that he'd been pushed. A flashlight swept by, catching that same twisted grin in the far corner. The mask's eyes glinted, not with reflected light, but as if from something watching just behind. Rachel yelled for everyone to get outside. We poured into the night, masks crooked, pulse racing. The barn stood dark and silent behind us. I huddled by the fire with the others, desperate for the joke to end. But the guest with the grotesque grin never walked out. No one ever saw him leave. By sunrise, we summoned the courage to go back inside. The barn looked wrong, as if cold air had sucked all the warmth and color away. In the center, on top of a bale, sat the mask with the widest, oldest grin. Stuffed into its mouth and spilling onto the straw were all our invitations, shredded beyond recognition. Nobody said a word. We knew, without speaking, that none of us would talk about it again. Now, when the wind rises on Halloween and the shadows lengthen, I see that crooked smile in every window, every reflection. I wonder who or what wore the mask that night. I wonder if the real joke is that Greendale doesn't get haunted every 10 years. But every year we pretend to laugh off something that's waiting for us to forget. Sometimes, I think I see the mask on my own shelf, grinning wider each time I look away. Or maybe it's just the dark playing tricks, but I know better than to laugh. Slumber mask. If you ever think sleepovers are just harmless fun, pizza, ghost stories, shared blankets on creaky floors, let me tell you about the last night I ever spent with my friends. My name is Lana, and Halloween used to be my favorite time of year. All those little fears felt safe behind a mask, until the night when one of us didn't wake up, and the line between stories and reality vanished. It was Jade's idea. She lived in the oldest house on our block, the one with the attic windows that always looked a little fogged up from outside, no matter the weather. Her mom let her throw a masked sleepover every Halloween. This year, there were 6 of us: me, Jade, Bree, Kira, twins Dan and Amy, and, I guess, whoever else our minds let in. Jade set the rules: come in costume, bring your best real-life scary story, and no one unmasks until sunrise. Her living room shimmered in candlelight, walls strung with orange fairy lights, popcorn bowls balanced dangerously on every surface. Each of us wore a mask: plastic zombies, webbed cats, whatever we'd thrifted or made ourselves. We snapped photos, mugged for stories, swearing not to break character. Midnight hit, and we gathered around the fireplace. Jade started, voice low and dramatic, telling the old tale of the Never Blinker, a local man with moon-pale eyelids, rumored to single out kids alone in the dark, stealing their sleep, their voices, their faces. He never blinks, Jade intoned, her mask reflecting firelight. He just waits until you forget he might be real. We all howled and jeered and flung bits of popcorn. But by the second story, Bree's about the girl who drowned in the locked bathroom upstairs, the mood had shifted. Shadows pressed in, the air hummed heavy and warm, and the wind outside rattled the front windows in unpredictable bursts. We dared each other to keep telling stories, to prove we weren't scared. The night stretched on, laughter thinning, whispers crawling in from the dark. Around 3 a.m., Amy complained her mask was itchy. Kira's was starting to slip with sweat. I tried to scratch at the edge of mine and realized suddenly it wouldn't budge. The elastic was tight, tighter than it should have been. My face prickling and damp under the plastic that should have been silly. Dan teased me, making me out to be a wimp, until he fumbled with his own mask and went silent. Each of us tried quietly to lift or tug at our masks under the blanket, but the fabric and glue held fast, as if they'd fused to our skin in the early hours. The room felt colder, our breath fogging the air. I drifted half asleep, the stories twisting into dreams that felt sticky and wrong. I came awake with a jolt, completely still, heart pounding, unable to move anything but my eyes. Something heavy moved across the carpet. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I strained to blink, but my eyelids wouldn't close. My mask pressed against brow and cheek so tightly that even my heartbeat seemed to echo inside the plastic. My mouth was sealed shut, dried out with fear, tongue thick and heavy. A sound. Breathing. It was impossibly loud, as if someone pressed their face right next to mine. In, out, unhurried, inhumanly steady. I tried to scream, but my throat barely made a whimper. I caught a shape, massive, hunched, face unmasked yet lacking features, only eye sockets that never closed, following each one of us lying stiff as mannequins. The breathing grew closer, hot and reeking of something old and rotten. The room seemed colder and smaller, time slipping away in loops. I have no idea when I lost consciousness. When I awoke, morning sunlight pushed weakly through the curtains. The smell of sweat and fear hung in the air with the leftover tang of burned-out candles. I sat up, mask suddenly loose, sticky against my cheek but not impossible to remove anymore. Dan and Kira blinked awake beside me. Bree was curled up in a ball. Amy was gone. We searched the house, every room, panic rising as her name stuck to our tongues like static. I ran to the front door, trailed by Jade, who swore she heard movement in the night. On the porch, in a pool of blood-warm sunlight, was Amy's mask, just sitting there. Not torn, not broken, but streaked inside with something dark and crusted. No one ever saw Amy again. The police asked us for details, and all we could say was that it felt like the Never-Blinker had visited. That his story wasn't just a story after all. Now I can't sleep with lights off. Can't wear a mask to any party. Can't stop hearing that endless, unblinking breathing in the quietest parts of the night. Sometimes I find Amy's mask at the foot of my bed, only for a split second, only as I wake. But every time I close my eyes, I worry they might not open again. The empty eyes. If you think a mask can hide who you really are, let me take you to the night that convinced me otherwise. My name is Jonah, and I've never been a believer in anything supernatural. Never bought into small-town rumors or haunted house stories. Halloween galas were always just an excuse to dress up and loosen up, nothing more. Until the year the contest was for most terrifying mask, and something found us in our own fears. I'd been hyped for the event for weeks. There was nothing else to do in our corner of the world after October's last leaves fell. No clubs, no midnight city lights, only this masquerade at the old Ledger Hotel, with real parquet floors and velvet curtains thick enough to drown a whisper. The contest had everyone excited. Social media feeds flooded with costume teasers. My roommate went as a stitched-up scarecrow. Others came as zombie brides, living dolls, reanimated corpses. The energy was infectious, shadowed under the red glow of Halloween bulbs. Scented with caramel, cheap cologne, and that sweetly rotting smell candles always conjured deep into the night. I made my rounds, relishing both the comfort of anonymity and the thrill of recognition behind every elaborate mask. But all chatter ebbed when someone stepped into the ballroom and all eyes, hidden or not, flicked their way. The mask was nearly nothing. Plain white, homemade, just a face, 2 holes where the eyes should be. Not even lashes or brows, just wide, hollow sockets that gave me chills the instant I met them. Everything about that person's costume was muted. Black suit, black shoes, gloves, no jewelry, no embellishments. Genderless, ageless, a figure slipped through a dark crack and stitched shut. They glided between clusters of guests without reacting to anyone's hellos or jokes, just stopping to turn those empty eyes on each person. Of course, everyone had to ask, "How'd you make that?" Or, "It's creepier than anything store-bought." But they never got more than a slow, silent look in response. The host, Chris, even tried to chat them up for a TikTok, but the figure only tilted their head, and Chris's smile wavered for the first time that night. Then came the questions. None of us remembers who heard them first. Maybe Gina, who swore she heard a whisper over her shoulder. Maybe Matt, whose jaw clenched after talking with the figure. Each time it was the same. A cold, flat voice asking, "What are you most afraid of?" The words slipped under the music, beneath the noise, soft but sharp as broken glass in your shoe. When you blinked, the guest was behind you, waiting for an answer. I laughed when they came up to me, but their presence erased any humor. My throat dried up. "What are you most afraid of?" They repeated, and my mind spilled open with images of the one nightmare I still can't shake. Standing alone, my secret flaws exposed, everyone knowing exactly how fake I sometimes feel. I mumbled something about losing control, and for a second, behind those empty sockets, it felt like someone listened, really listened, took what I said and hid it away. Others seemed shaken too. The air itself grew colder as the night wore on, little beads of sweat prickling at the back of my neck as the masked guest repeated their tour, never speaking unless to ask again about our deepest fears. No one saw them eat or drink or join a conversation. At midnight, the contest was called. Scarecrow got most creative. Someone as the headless horseman took funniest, but for most terrifying, the judges hesitated. One spent a few extra seconds near the plain mask, pale and unnerved. There was a murmur among guests, but no sign of the figure. Just emptiness where they had stood a second before. A warm, queasy tension blanketed the room, conversation shifting to a whisper, then unbearable silence. My hands shook as I peeled off my own mask. I felt eyes on me, though all around were laughing faces, red-cheeked from punch and jokes. Only when I went into the coat room to retrieve my jacket did realization dawn. Every mirror in the place seemed to reflect something moving behind me, that hollow-eyed mask drifting close, too far in the background to focus on, but never falling out of frame. In the days after, guests described waking up to uneasy dreams, voices whispering their confessions aloud, cryptic notes written in dust on windshields, sometimes just an icy draft that made you flinch in your own hallway. Some said they caught the plain mask's hollow-eyed stare in the dark between blinking and sleeping, learning all their secrets, feeding on small dreads. As for me, I haven't slept a full night since. I glance in every mirror, searching for that blank mask, the nothing that waits behind all our faces. I wonder what it really wanted with us, what it wanted with me. Because sometimes at night, a voice just outside my door whispers, "What are you most afraid of?" And I know that mask has no intention of ever letting me forget. If stories like this sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button to let me know you want more. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I post new horror every week, and you never know when the next tale might find you. Drop your darkest fear in the comments below, and maybe, just maybe, the next story will be about what keeps you up at night.